Dear students, today we'll talk about the sustainability and the financial sector. I am Dr. Sharat Khandekar and I'm your lecturer for today. So in the first slide, we'll talk about why is sustainability important for the financial sector. So when we're talking about sustainability is about ensuring long-term business success while contributing towards economic and social development, a healthy environment, and a stable society. So we are talking about a stable society and a healthy environment for an organization, which is absolutely important for not only sustain for a long term and also is important for the profitability and long-term gain of an organization. Now there are three broad reasons why sustainability is important. Number one is stakeholder pressure. 2 is profit. 3, a desire to do the right things. So why sustainability is important? Now in this slide we can see there are several factors that includes here and suggesting why it is important. So number one, it's saying, so if you look here, that why sustainability is important for the financial sector, there are few points described here. We also talk about the ESG framework, which is environmental, social and governance framework. What are the environmental issues and the financial sector that are impacting the environmental issues in the financial sector? We'll also talk about the social issues, governance issues, and we'll also talk about ESG agenda. So when we're talking about why sustainability is important, the number one is the stakeholder pressure. Now in the remaining slide, it will discuss about all these points about the sustainability and its importance for the financial sector and other issues. So number one, as I discussed earlier, that the stakeholder pressure is one of the most important points for the financial sector. So who are the stakeholders? Now let's define it first. So a stakeholder is any person or organization that can influence the ability of an organization to achieve its objectives and goals. So if you take this definition, so the main stakeholders for a typical financial organization includes number one, shareholders. 2, government. 3, employees. 4, suppliers. 5, customers. 6, competitors. 7, community. And 8, the lobby groups. All of these individual people and the organization, they are strongly related to an organization, and these are called the stakeholders. So each group has its own agenda and level of interest in financial and non-financial issues and will influence the financial institution in relation to this. And that's why it is absolutely important for an organization. And also there are huge pressure from stakeholders to follow the sustainability issues for financial institution. In this slide is talking about the sustainability jargons. So basically in this slide it discusses about different types, different definitions of sustainability. For example, the first one is the carbon footprint. What is the carbon footprint and the definition? So if you look at the definition, it said that a measure of the impact an individual or organization has on the environment in terms of the amount of greenhouse gases produced. So that is called the carbon footprint. Now there are several other definitions that have been included. These definitions are important for you in order to understand the topic. I do not want to go through all the definitions because you can read from here. Now, some of these definitions we will be discussing in our following slides. Second point is the profit maximization. So, in the profit maximization, as we know, profit is the key operational motivation for a financial institution. So, for a financial institution, profit is the main thing, and that's why they're running. But how do we make money out of environmental, social, and governance issues? These are getting more and more attraction nowadays. And there are three main answers how a financial institution can get operational profit using the ESG agendas or issues. So, one is reduce cost, two, increase returns, and three is mitigating the risk. So, how do the ESG framework can reduce cost? Let's take an example. Let's think about a household who is using the green solar panels or solar power. As we know, if we install solar power in a house, that will reduce substantially the electricity cost of that particular house. So initially it can cost a large amount to purchase the solar panel and purchase the solar inverter and the system, but eventually for the long run it will reduce the cost. So the same goes for the increasing return, because when we'll have reduced cost, that will of course increase our return, and it will also reduce our risk for the future. For example, Spotlight in Australia, they're using lots of their energy using the solar panel, and that reduced their cost significantly. The next slide is about the ESG framework. Now, in some cases, there are genuine desire to do the right things, and in some cases, the desire is translated into a broader organizational culture. So, what do you understand by genuine desire to do the right things? So sometimes it is coming within the policy of the government to do the right thing, to improve the organizational culture, to improve the environment, and that is called the genuine desire to do the right things. For example, in Australia, recently all polythene bags have been banned from the supermarket. So Coles, Woolworth, Aldi, all the supermarket will not supply the plastic bags. So this is something we can say that this is desire to do the right thing, because as we know, the plastic bags can damage our environment, and to destroy the plastic bag within the environment or just to mix with the environment, it can take up to 30 years. So plastic bags are damaging the environment. A desire to do the right thing is including in this scenario where the supermarket do not allow to use the plastic bag anymore. And in some cases, the desire is translated into a broader organizational culture. In most of the office, if you want to print some paper, so by default all these printers print double-sided. Before it was single-sided. Now it became a broader organizational culture to print double-sided materials. Not only that, nowadays we are using more and more soft copy of the materials. For example, you can use the unit outline online instead of printing the unit outline. That is actually saving a lot of our paper. So what are the environmental issues in the financial sector that are actually we can see now? For example, in the financial firms or the sector nowadays, the eco-friendly buildings are emerging, or the practice are emerging. So that is actually helping the environment. Not only that, increasing concern about the environmental issue and particular to the climate change. So the environmental issues are now gaining lots of popularity, and people are thinking about it. People are aware about that, the climate change. So it become a broader organizational culture. Not only that, people are aware about the impact of the climate change. So quite simply, if the climate does change, asset values, insurance and credit portfolio will be affected, and financial sector are now thinking more practically about these issues. So when we're talking about the climate change, so what is the climate change and how the climate change present risk and opportunities to the financial firms? Now when we're talking about the climate change, what do we understand? This is a very big issue nowadays, and there are several countries of the world that might be affected because of the climate change. Think about it. Think about the other part of the world. Think about the coldest continent, Antarctica. If the climate change occurs, and because of the global warming, the temperature increases about 2 to 3 degrees in next few years' time, how it will be impacted the Antarctica. Some part of this coldest continent will start melting, and this melting will start or will impact the sea level rises. And then how it's going to impact the countries? Some countries, for example, Maldives, India, Bangladesh, some of the coastal regions will be under the water, and it will be impossible for the human life to live in all those areas. And that will be a big threat for the financial sector as well as for the humanity. Now, there are not only the risks, there are also some opportunities. For example, the opportunities may include the new asset class. So we're thinking about the new asset. For example, think about the solar panels, solar panel inverters. We haven't heard about these solar panels about 20 years back. Because of the climate change issues, environmental issues, new asset has emerged. Eco-friendly building is another example. Or think about the hybrid cars. Most of the big car manufacturers are now using the hybrid cars, where if you're driving this car within the city and if you're driving less than 60 km speed per hour, then it will be running on the batteries. So these types of technologies now are emerging. So the new investment products are coming now, and the chances of building a positive brand image and reputation is also emerging. So nowadays, if the company is having a bad reputation or negative brand impact, that will be a significant loss for an organization. Think about the BP oil spill in the USA, how it has been impacted the whole world, and how USA reacted on the BP oil spill. Now, let's watch a video. This video is very, very important as we're discussing about the climate change, how the climate change can impact some of the countries. So we'll look at this video. This is about a country which will be severely affected by the climate change. Have a look. We'll come back soon.
Arriving for a cabinet meeting, a member of the Maldives government takes an unorthodox journey to work. He and fellow cabinet members were holding the world's first underwater cabinet meeting in the shallow seas surrounding the Maldives Islands. They conducted the meeting using hand signals and slates. And while holding meetings in full scuba diving gear could seem quite a fun idea, the thinking behind this meeting is deadly serious. The Maldives is one of the most vulnerable places on Earth to rising sea levels. Its politicians, seen here signing an SOS message at their underwater desks, want the rest of the world to know just how precarious their and other low-lying countries' situations are. Global warming could increase sea levels and submerge the chain of islands, and people here are desperate for the world to get a grip on rising carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. The idea was the brainchild of their president, Mohammed Nasheed, who's sending the SOS message to be presented at the UN Climate Change Summit in Copenhagen.
Actually trying to send our message, let the world know what is happening and what will happen to the Maldives if climate change is not checked. This is a challenging situation, and we want to see that everyone else is also occupied as much as we are, and would like to see that people actually do something about it.
And he said it wasn't just the Maldives that the world needed to worry about.
If Maldives cannot be saved today, we do not feel that there is much of a chance for the rest of the world.
Rising sea levels of up to 58 centimetres, as predicted by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, threaten to submerge most of the Maldives' low-lying islands by the year 2100. Penny Tweedy, Reuters.
Hopefully you enjoyed the video. So now we understand that climate change is a real factor. Now in this slide, we'll talk about the carbon emission by country. If you look into the carbon emission by country, you will find USA and China is number 1 and 2, which produce the maximum number of CO2 emission in the environment. Interestingly, you will find that Australia is ranked somewhere number 16. Now remember, student, this chart or the data is showing you the total CO2 emission by country. But when we look into the per capita, this ranking changed a lot. So this slide is discussing about CO2 emission per capita by country. If you look this chart, you'll find Australia is number 1, which is producing more than 18.6 metric tons of CO2 emission per capita. US is number 2, Canada is number 3, Russia is around number 4, and they are showing other countries. So if you look here, India is far behind China as well. Now the next slide is showing the carbon emission by sector of different sectors. So for example, power station, which is 21.3%. Industrial process, 16.8%. Transportation fuel, 14%. Agricultural byproduct, 12.5%. Land uses and biomass burning is 10%. Residential, commercial and other resources or sources is about 10.3%. So these are the main sector that we can blame for the carbon emission. So let's ask you, why do you think Australia is number one country for carbon emission per capita? What do you think? Let's think about it and discuss in the class. Now the question is the financial sector ready? So a survey found that the financial sector face considerable challenges. So what are the challenges faced by the financial sector? So one of the challenges is the ESG agenda is not well understood, and the risk and opportunities are not fully grasped. So in the financial sector, the environmental, social and governance agenda is not fully understood. A lot of us were still thinking about what are the chances of the carbon emission or environmental disaster. So there are lacks of understanding or knowledge in the financial sector. Second, the financial sector is still very much focused on short-term performance. Now that is another problem. Financial sector is still looking for the profitability, and the profitability is looking by the financial sector is for the short term. Let's think about the GFC. Lot of expertise in the financial sector. They knew that something is coming. They predict about the GFC or the global financial crisis. But could we stop the GFC? No. So because the financial sector is still very much looking for the short-term profit. Third point is ESG issues are not usually incorporated into pricing and valuation models, and that is a big problem as well. And the fourth is the leadership by the relevant professional bodies is required. We do not have a strong professional body for this, and we have a shortage of leadership. That leader will show us the guidance for the financial sector, how the financial sector can prepare for the challenges that are coming in very soon for the financial sector. So these are the challenges that are currently facing the financial sector. So the social issues and the financial sector. So the social issues are of increasing importance to the financial sector day by day, and this is mainly driven by the stakeholders pressure, because stakeholders, which are every relevant party of the organization, is pushing the organization or pressurizing the organization so that the organization can have a strong social responsibility. And because a loss of reputation in the business that can be very damaging, social issues in the financial sector are now getting more and more popularity. The governance issues and the financial sector. So the governments or the governance in the financial sector is receiving more and more attention than ever. Nowadays, if you look at the annual report, you will find that almost every companies in the developed nation are publishing about their ESG framework and their agenda, and they have sufficient disclosures about their governance issue. Now this has been happened because of the global financial crisis and the restrictions that imposed in the financial sector. In this next slide, next slide will look at the GFC crisis and what happens after the GFC crisis. So we can see here that several organizations such as the banks, the name has been listed. In this part, it is the location, the state, the date, and asset at the time of the failure. So for example, look at the Washington Mutual, which was located at the Washington DC. So at the time of the bank failure, the asset was $307 billion. IndyMac from California, $32 billion. Colonial Bank, Alabama, $25 billion. So these are the large banks that couldn't sustain or severely affected during the global financial crisis. So that's why the corporate governance agenda is absolutely important, and sustainability in the financial sector is more and more important for nowadays. So what is corporate governance? So the corporate governance described the framework by which companies are directed and controlled. So this includes the setting the objectives and monitoring the performance of an organization. While there is no agreed model of corporate governance, there are sets of principles. So there are 6 principles that we can see for the corporate governance model, which has been developed by OECD countries, and this model has been followed across the globe, and this model is based on 6 principles. So the first principle of OECD includes principle 1, which is ensuring the basis for the effective corporate governance framework, which is the corporate governance framework should, for example, promote transparency and efficient market. Principle number 2, the rights of shareholders and key ownership functions, which means the corporate governance framework should promote and facilitate the exercise of shareholders' rights. Principle number 3 is the equitable treatment of shareholders, which means the corporate governance framework should ensure the equitable treatment of shareholders, including foreign and minority shareholders. Principle 4 is the role of stakeholders in corporate governance. That means the corporate governance framework should recognize the rights of stakeholders, which is established by the law. Principle 5 is disclosure and transparency. That means the corporate governance framework should ensure the timely and accurate disclosure on all matters regarding the corporation, which is absolutely important. And the last principle, which is principle number 6, is the responsibilities of the board, which indicate the corporate governance framework should ensure the strategic guideline of the company, effective monitoring of management, and the board's accountability to shareholders. So these are the 6 principles which is followed by OECD. So if you look at the corporate governance framework and the principle and the number of companies which are following now and looking to the ranking, you will find in the United Kingdom there are 394 companies are following the 6th principle, and their average score is 7.6. So in this ranking, we can see the countries which are ranked against the overall rating. Number 2 is Canada. Their overall rating is 7.36, and 132 companies are following the principles accurately. Australia is number 6, and 194 companies are following the principle, and the rating is 6.65. Germany, on the other hand, is ranked 12, and their score is 5.18. Denmark is number 24, and India is number 20. So the progressing the ESG agenda. So the progressing of the ESG agenda is happening. The financial sector are now giving more and more attention for the ESG agenda, as it is important not only for the ideological but as well as for the pragmatic reasons. So the financial service sectors has strong engagement in the following ESG agendas or activities. For example, social responsible investment, now getting more and more attractions. Carbon footprint management, industry codes and standard, and the development of expertise. So these are the strong sectors that the financial sectors are developing now following the ESG activities. However, there are still so many challenges in the corporate governance sector or following the ESG framework. And we list some of these challenges in this slide. So number one is the regulatory uncertainty. For some countries, there are uncertain regulation. Two is perception of high risk, low return from ESG product. Now, this is a common challenge because we still have a perception that ESG products are high risk and very low return. Low demand from the client in ESG product because we're still thinking for the short-term profit. Even the clients are thinking for short-term profit. So there are still low demand because ESG product might be expensive in short run. But when we're talking about the long run, because of the cost issues and the risk issues, the price will go down. Fourth is a general lack of expertise, skills and knowledge. So we're still shortage of expertise in this area. Number 6 is a lack of government incentives for investment in new technologies. So still we have a very shortage of government incentives. Think about Australia. The solar energy rebates have been changed a couple of times last 10 years. So still there are some lack of government incentives, and the government should come to a policy to support the social investments and responsible investments. And the last point is a reluctance to be the early mover. So everyone is just waiting what the others are thinking, what others are doing, and no one wants to put their step first. So that is all about today's lecture. The next slide is about the summary, what we have learned today. Hopefully you learned something about this topic today, which is ESG framework, corporate governance, and social investment, social responsible investment. If you have any question, please feel free to send me an email or see me personally. Thank you very much, and I will see you soon in our next lectures. Thanks.